Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to America once again and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. If memory serves me correctly, this will also be my first visit to this state on the channel, although I have actually been there in person before. But yeah, always nice to try new beers from different parts of America. There's lots of good breweries over there, of course. But yeah, these guys have been getting some very positive press in recent times. They're supposed to be very well known for their kind of New England hazy IPAs, so I think it is quite cool that we can introduce them here on the channel. So yeah, certainly the first time I've come across one of their beers here in Scandinavia. Very curious to see what it has in store for us. So hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review. And as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to St. Louis in Missouri in the American Midwest. And we're going to go to the north of the city to a little place called Florissant, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But that, of course, is home to Narrow Guage Brewing Company. And we're going to be having a little look at their OJ run today. So this one comes in at 8.6% ABV, and it's a New England hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, I found this beer in Kiosk over the water in Copenhagen, and yeah, as I say, it was just a brewery that I hadn't heard of before. I had a little look at it. And yeah, it was the kind of OG thing. The fact that it also has some Amarillo in it certainly caught my eye as well. As you guys watching the channel for a long time will know, I'm a big sucker for orangey leaning IPAs, be they West Coast or New England. So yeah, as I say, very curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. Let's crack on and see what we have here. Very cool to introduce Narrow Guage Brewing here on the channel. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Narrow Guage Brewing. This is the very first time I'm introducing them here on the channel as well, as I've mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and you can of course go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on geography. The whole channel has a geography based tagging system, so use the search bar, search for beer based on, you know, country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in, and you can of course check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist, and we're kind of adding to that one whenever we get the chance. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then to talk a little bit about Narrow Guage Brewing before we actually taste the beer. So, Narrow Guage Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Florissant in the northern part of St. Louis in Missouri in the American Midwest, and the company was founded by Jeff Hardesty along with his wife Heather and Ben Goldcamp and Dave Beckham, who are the owners of the Cugino's restaurant in the area. But Jeff has lived in Florissant since 2007, and Cugino's is one of his local restaurants, so that was where the kind of partnership came, if you like. But both Jeff and Heather have backgrounds in engineering. Jeff worked for Winchester Ammunition, while Heather worked designing power lines. She was more of a kind of electrical engineer, I guess. But Jeff got into home brewing and he honed his knowledge on the internet. He read various blogs, books, and all these kind of things. And, you know, he said he was just fascinated with the fermentation process. But he had originally plans to find somewhere rural and build a steel-framed building to house his brewery. But apparently he kept running into Ben and Dave at beer events around the local area. And so they decided to partner up and brew for themselves. But they converted a banquet room in the restaurant's basement. And Jeff managed to successfully design a 3-barrel brew kit that would work in the small space. The first brew day that they had was on 11th of May 2016. And Jeff decided to name the project, the brewing project, Narrow Guage, after the railway that used to run to the area from central St. Louis. And apparently it was just to try and give as well the area some kind of recognition, to get people to think about this area of the city again, because apparently it is quite a suburban area from what I've seen. But over time, the brewery became very well known in the St. Louis area. They got a lot of decoration as well. You know, they became quite recognised. They were named as the best new brewery in Missouri, and I think St. Louis as well by Rate Beer. But they became well known. And they actually upgraded the brewery to a 6-barrel kit in 2018. They added a canning line as well, and this allowed them to get their beers out there a little bit more across the state and, you know, further afield. But in early 2020, they purchased a property at 1545 North Highway 67, Hope I've got that in all the right order. But they plan to move their brewing operations and retail operations there at some point in the near future. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there were a number of delays to actually renovating this space, but construction finally started in September of 2022 this year. But as of October 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 325 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And like I said, they are supposed to be very well known for their different New England hazy IPAs. I can't tell you, I can't verify that, of course, other than looking at the Untappd lists. But yeah, they've got a whole host of different things. But I was told, yeah, New England hazy IPA brewery, mate, for the most part. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about Narrow Gauge Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out, the Rate Beer Untappd pages to learn a little bit more about the different beers that they've done. And hopefully in the future you can check out more reviews from me on this brewery as well. But yeah, let's crack on then and have a wee look at the beer itself. So, as I mentioned to you, this one is called OJ Run. It tells you a little bit on the back here. It comes at 8.6% ABV. It's a New England hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. There you can see the narrow gauge symbol, of course, which is quite cool. I think it's like a cross section of the rails and the sleepers and stuff. So I think that is pretty nice. But yeah, the hops in this one are Citra, Galaxy, Amarillo and Apollo. We've come across all of these hops before. They're all American apart from Galaxy, which is Australian. Citra it has about 14% alpha acid. In a New England, it's going to give you a big kind of juicy mango, but also a bit of limey character. Galaxy is going to give you a big pungent passion fruit, but at the same time, it's going to give you some juicy mango and a bit of pineapple and stuff like that. Amarillo is that big zesty orangey character. That usually has about 12% alpha acid from what I remember, but yeah, Amarillo has that. Yeah, love Amarillo. I've missed it a lot. And then Apollo is one that we haven't come across as often as the others. It's about like 15-16% alpha acid. It's used quite often as a bittering hop from what I understand. It's got a big piney resinous character, but it can also give you like quite a strong grapefruit and a good hint of orange as well, actually. So yeah, that's a little rundown on the hops. The can itself is 1 American pint, so that is 473 millilitres. The Americans are calling it 16 fluid ounces. But as you know, I hate the American liquid measurement system. It really annoys me. It just makes no sense. Just use millilitres, guys. Come on. I mean, it's based on water, universal solvent. But anyway, as we say, 1 American pint. This beer cost me 80 Danish kroner. So that is roughly about, 105 Swedish kroner. So that is going to be like, yeah, €10.50, somewhere in the region of, £9.50 sterling, I guess, about $11 for the can. So yeah, a wee bit more expensive, but yeah, sometimes you have to just say, fuck it, why not? But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see how we go. An 8.6% New England hazy Imperial Double IPA, and my first encounter with Narrow Gauge Brewing Company, and they're supposed to be pretty good. So there we are. Curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. So I think we've got maybe 75% of the beer out into the can, out into the glass, 3/4 or so. But yeah, let's have a wee look at this thing. So it's pretty much poured exactly as you would expect from a kind of New England hazy IPA. You can see we've got about a half finger of a frothy, I would say, perfect white head. That is just fading away to be a kind of thin foamy layer, and you can see there's a nice kind of thicker ring of foam just around the edge of the glass. I'll let you have a wee look at that there. So you can see some medium bubbles on the bottom and a few smaller ones just getting up toward the bottom of the head there. But yeah, the colour of this one is quite nice. It's actually got a slightly deeper colour to it than a number of the European New England IPAs that I've been reviewing for you recently. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will of course affect the colour of your beer as well, but obviously, being a New England IPA, you don't really have to care about those 2 variables that I mentioned at the end there. But yeah, definitely a more kind of deep, kind of mixed tropical fruit juice colour, this one, I would say. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, and a few little ones kind of creeping up toward the kind of surface layer of the beer. But yeah, in terms of haziness, it is pretty soupy and gloopy, but not the soupiest and gloopiest New England IPA that I've seen. And remember, the level of haze in these beers depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree the yeast as well. There's not really a rule about going up the alcohol scale. Theoretically, if you went up the alcohol scale, you've got more oak, more wheat, thus more haze. It doesn't work like that. It varies from brewery to brewery and even beer to beer, actually. So, yeah, it can just be, it can be a multitude of things that can affect it. So yeah, pretty good. But if we shine the light through this beer, yeah, you do get a little bit of it. It's got quite a lot of opacity to it, but yeah, it is more it's more hazy than not. But you'd expect that for a New England IPA. So I don't think we really need to say anything else about the appearance of this one. But yeah, let's take a wee look at the aroma and see what it has in store for us. Aroma wise, this is pretty interesting. I mean, it does smell a little bit more kind of malty and things. And as I've said to you, for me, there are 6 directions you can take a New England IPA. They can be kind of farmhousey and yeasty. They can be rye leaning and grainy. Those are a bit more common in American brewed New England IPAs in my experience. But you can have wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and you can also get kind of the sweet side of things. This one has quite a bit of sweet character on the nose. And it does, as I say, it just smells more. It's got a good little bit of sweetness in there. There is a good little bit of wheat as well. Yeah, it's quite interesting, this one, actually. It's yeah, kind of wheaty leaning, definitely some oaty creaminess in there as well. And as I say, just a little bit malt. The green component for me is quite bright and quite floral. And it's also got a nice little bit of, it's just got a nice little bit of oily fruity character as well. So yeah, I'm curious about this. I don't think I've had Apollo too many times in a New England IPA. I've not had Amarillo too many times in a New England IPA either. That was always one of the hops I loved in the old West Coasts. But yeah, I wish there were more West Coasts. I do miss them, actually. But yeah, the malt base in this one, we should point this out, is Golden Promise, oats, and then acidulated. So the thing with this beer, and I was picking up on this a little bit, the acidulated malt, Magic Rock in England they used to love using acidulated malt. It gives you this, it almost gives you this just candy. We have a sweet back home in Scotland, and there's also one here in Sweden. In Sweden it reminds me of like Bilar sweets, the little cars, and in Scotland it reminds me of the kind of Parma Violet sweets that we would have. The malt base just has this kind of candied thing to it. It's almost like a sherbet. It's got the same kind of smell that you get from sherbet, but it's like different fruits and things. So I'm getting quite a bit of that in the malt base too. So let's just break this beer down and actually describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. We'll break the aroma down and go for that. But yeah, the backbone of the beer, you absolutely get a little bit of that kind of fresh white bread crust in there. Above that, white bread, from what I'm guessing will be the pale malt in this one. There will be pale malt in there as well as the kind of Golden Promise. But yeah, absolutely getting some of that. And they're fresh, fluffy white bread. You can smell a kind of thicker layer above that. This one doesn't have wheat in it, I don't think. Certainly doesn't mention anything about wheat, but usually you get kind of a lighter bread and you get a more dense bread, and you can certainly get that in this beer. So above that, as I say, you start to get some of the notes from the acidulated malt, and like I say, it really reminds me, I don't know what you could compare it to in America. I'm not overly familiar with American sweets, candies as they would call them, but to me it really reminds me of like the Parma Violet sweets that we had in Scotland, or the Bilars that we have here in Sweden. It really is kind of, it just has this sort of like kind of candy sort of thing to it in the middle of the nose. So yeah, that's your acidulated malt that's doing that. American acidulated malt is probably a bit different from the stuff in England or I don't know if the Germans really acidulate malt that much, but correct me on that if I'm wrong. Probably the only style they would do that with would be like a Goza maybe. But yeah, you certainly do get a little bit of that kind of candied thing in there, but above that, of course, you have this nice kind of creamy oaty malt base. So lovely kind of creamy oats in there. You've got that little bit of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing going on as well. Yeah, so big oaty creaminess, a little bit of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotch. Yeah, I think it's quite interesting in the malt base. I'm curious to see how that's going to translate into the flavour. But other than that, there's maybe a little very slight woody note to it. Maybe a little bit of cracker as well, Jacob's cream cracker. I don't know how good these references will be for Americans, of course. I can't remember if you get Jacob's Cream Cracker, although I did learn that you get Werther's Original in America. One of the American guys who watches my channel regularly was telling me that. But yeah, aroma wise, as I say, for me the malt base of this beer is actually quite it's quite prominent actually. But yeah, I think we've said everything we need about the malty side of the aroma. Let's have a wee look at the kind of fruity and hoppy side of things. So the green component, as I said, it's not overly pungent in this beer. And remember, New England IPAs rely on late addition hopping and dry hopping. You also have early addition hopping. So early addition hopping is the one that gives you most of your bitterness within the first hour of the wort boil. Late addition hopping is within the last half hour of your wort boil. A little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping after the wort boil gives you all flavour and aroma. So you need to bear this in mind. New England IPAs rely on the latter two. West Coast IPAs tend to use all three, and that again is where you get your bitterness from in the West Coasts. But with this one, the thing is, with when you have early addition hopping, really the aroma can be very deep and very dank when it comes to the green side of things. But with New England's, because of the late addition and dry hopping, it's usually quite bright, and that's what you get in this beer. You do get quite a nice bright floral note in there, and there's quite a wet but slightly zesty, grassy character as well. And of course, behind that, you've got all the fruity notes coming out of the beer. For me, this one really does lean toward the orangey side of things. You can smell the big zesty oily orange from the Amarillo already, and I guess the Apollo will be kind of promoting that as well. I'm not overly familiar with Apollo, I'll be very clear on that, but pardon me, behind that big oily orange punch that this beer has, you really do start to get some of the behind some of that, you do start to get the more tropical notes. You can smell a little bit of that stronger passion fruit, which will be both from the Citra and the Galaxy. There's a big, you get a juicy mango in there, and you start to get some of the kind of softer tropical fruits underneath, like, you do get the kind of tropical fruits underneath, like a little bit of apricot, and there is a bit of pineapple. The pineapple's most likely to come from the Galaxy, I would say. But yeah, big juicy mango, a little bit of kind of apricot and papaya and things like that, which I think is most likely from the Citra, to be honest with you. But yeah, you certainly, the more you smell of this beer and the more you get used to it, the oranges kind of subside a little bit and you get more of the tropical fruit from the Citra and Galaxy for sure. But aroma wise, this one is pretty damn nice, I have to say. And the acidulated malt is a little bit of a blast from the past. It makes me think of the old, the Cannonball series from Magic Rock in England. That was always quite interesting. But as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. I think it is about time for us to try this one now though. So yeah, this one is the OJ Run, an 8.6% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Narrow Gauge Brewing Company near St. Louis in Missouri in the American Midwest. They do have a double dry hop version of this one as well, but yeah, this is the original. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty nice actually. I have to say, first impression of this one is, it is actually quite different in its vibe to the other New Englands that I've had in recent times. I'm trying to remember what the last American brewed one that I had was. We've had quite a few on tap in the pub that I do some shifts in. I'm trying to remember what the last one that we had was, but this one, even compared to some of the other American ones I've had, this is actually quite a little bit lighter and a bit wetter in some ways. A lot of the other ones, the Danish and the Swedish ones and the Norwegian things that I can drink quite easily, along with some of the English and Scottish ones, this really is quite different. This is a bit more of a kind of wet and slick New England IPA, but it is damn good, I have to say. So yeah, this is pretty damn nice, I have to say. I'm just going to say straight away, thumbs up to Narrow Gauge Brewing for this. It's a solid beer, and I like things like this that are a wee bit different and show you a different side to a style that you know quite well. There's so many New Englands out there these days. As I've said, I would love to see more West Coast and more black IPAs, cold IPAs of course, are getting a little bit more popular as well. But yeah, this is pretty damn solid. But like I say, first impression of it is it's a very soft and juicy New England, but at the same time, it's not quite as thick and creamy as some of the ones I've come across. It is a bit more kind of oily and slick, and it does have a fair degree of sweetness to it as well, but I like this one, so gets a thumbs up from me. Very nice drinkable beer. It's almost dangerously drinkable at 8.6% ABV, but yeah. So, yeah, let's break this beer down as we always do and describe the flavour for you properly. Middle third of your palate, you've got that lovely little bit of kind of, you've got that backbone of the beer, so you've got a little bit of that fresh kind of white bready bread crust, and it actually does give you a little bit of graininess the further into the aftertaste that you go with the beer. You do get a little bit of that graininess in the middle of your palate. When you go toward the front of that middle third of your tongue, there will be just one or two little woody undertones there, and then above the bread crust you get a touch of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker type quality, so that's interesting. Above all of that though, I'm actually getting, and this is a bit of a surprise compared to the aroma, I'm actually getting a little bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bready layer, so that's interesting as well. But above that you have a nice kind of you do have a nice little bit of a thicker white bready character as well. So yeah, you've got that nice little bit of, as I say, white bready wheaty layer sitting above that, and that's good. I do like how that goes together for sure. So you've got that nice, yeah, bread crust, little bit of wood, cracker, brown bread, white bread, and you can feel that on top of the white bread, that's where you're getting the kind of acidulated malt in this one. And acidulated malt, I always remember with these Magic Rock beers that I was speaking about, they always gave you just this little bit of it. You almost just had this little bit of waxiness. They always just added a little bit of waxiness to the mouthfeel, and you kind of get that on top of the bread. It's just got this, it's almost like a waxy flavour, and the liquid just kind of goes right over the wax almost. It's a bit difficult to describe what the acidulated malt does, I find. But yeah, you can just feel the acidulated malt sitting on top of the bread and just giving you a wee bit of that kind of Parma violet, Bilar sweet sort of thing in there. That kind of slightly sour, can we call it citricy sort of sweet. So yeah, I've not had acidulated malt in a New England hazy, whatever we call it, IPA for quite a while. So this beer is a little bit of a blast from the past in that way. I don't think I've ever had acidulated malt in an American brewed New England IPA, come to think of it. So yeah, that is pretty interesting. Above that layer of acidulated malt though, that's when you start to get the oats. So if you go down the kind of middle line of your tongue, you can feel that nice kind of creamy oaty layer. But this beer, it doesn't feel overly oaty in a sense. It really doesn't feel so overly oaty. But yeah, you get a little bit of that kind of porridgey oaty sort of thing, and it gets a little bit creamy as as you move further out toward the kind of edges of your palate there. But it's certainly interesting in that sense. The golden promise is nice in this beer as well. And as I've always said, you can use the oats in New England IPAs to get a rough idea of how fresh your beer is. The creamier they are, the fresher the beer is, the kind of drier, the more dry character that they give you, that tells you that the beer's a little bit older. But with this beer, as I say, you've got that creamy oaty character down the middle line of your tongue, and it just dries out a little bit as you go out toward the edges of that middle third of your palate. So yeah, I like it. I do like how that goes together. Yeah, that is quite nice. In the dead centre, if you go to the very centre of that middle third of your palate, you do get a little tap, you do get some of the brown sugar out of this beer. So there's a wee bit of that kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. That is, of course, the alcohol in the beer, but as you move further out from that, you start to get the more kind of McVitie's digestive, biscuity sort of thing. The Americans would call it cookies, I would say biscuit. But yeah, you certainly get that, and that's one of the kind of trademark things of Golden Promise. Golden Promise is a very popular malt to use in these New England hazy IPAs. I think at this point we've said everything we need to about the middle third of the palate in this beer. Let's go to the back third of your palate. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of bready build up in there, and you know the layers in this beer are kind of similar there. But you know, as we always say, more bitter and grainy flavors come out further back on the palate. The sweeter flavors come out further forward. So you get that nice kind of you do get that nice kind of bread crusty grainy character in the base. On top of that, you have the nice you do get a little bit of the crackery dryness, but then you get the wholemeal bread. That layer is a little bit taller. You get the white bread in there as well. And again, that layer is a little bit taller, but just a little bit more airy. And above that, you know, if I didn't know better, I would say there's a bit of wheaty bitiness there. There is almost just something that's a little bit bitey and kind of zippy on top of the kind of bready layers there. And then above all of that, you've got some of the kind of yeasty notes coming out of the beer as well. So yeah, I like how that goes together. So yeah, the way that that beer goes together, I think is very very nice in that sense. So yeah, back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is definitely taller, and then as you come further forward, it just condenses down a little bit and squashes together. So yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business is very very nice in that sense. Yeah, I really like this one. I do like how that goes together. So yeah, the multi base in this one is really just interesting. As I say, it reminds me of the Magic Rock stuff that we used to have from England. So yeah, thumbs up to them for yeah. It's a little bit of a blast from the past, this beer, and as I say, it is a bit different from what we've had in other places. So yeah, interesting. But in terms of I think we should move on to the hoppy side of things with this beer now. So back corners of the palate, absolutely, you've got a little touch of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of herbal character. But then as you push further forward from that, it starts to get progressively more floral as you come kind of further forward along the sides of the tongue there. Round the front curve of the palate, though, it's a little bit lighter and grassy. There's a little touch of zestiness to it as well. But yeah, a little bit of floral note, a little bit of zesty grassiness in there. But yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think, is very very nice. So yeah, the green component kind of adds just a little bit of depth there, but yeah, a bit more herbal and an earthy character coming out of it later on. So yeah, let's focus on that front third of your palate then and the fruity side of things. So the border region between front and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in the beer. So yeah, a little bit of white bready character in there. The base of that front third of your palate is more kind of white bready as well. So yeah, I like how that goes together. And then above that, you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. Yeah. So yeah, it's that nice that fruity kind of thing as well. That's in there. It is kind of similar to what we described in the aroma, but it's actually a lot. The flavour composition is the same, but it's not quite as big and zesty and oily and things as I thought it was going to be. The fruits are actually quite light in this one almost. But yeah, if you go to the back of that front third of your palate, there's a wee touch of the grapefruit in there, which will be from the Citra and the Apollo, I guess. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of passion fruit in there. And then the further into the aftertaste, you will get a wee bit of the juicy mango, but the passion fruit and the mango and stuff are actually quite mild in this beer, I find. It's kind of like the back of that front third of your palate is more, it's almost got a wee bit of a more kind of like dry apricot-y sultana type thing to it. Yeah, I think, yeah. There, as I say, there is a little bit of the grapefruit, there is a bit of passion fruit, and there is a bit of mango. When you take the beer in, you get those. But then, as the flavour progresses into the aftertaste, the back half of that front third of your palate, it really becomes, yeah, like quite sultana, you know, a little bit of dried apricot, and, you know, it's almost a little bit peary as well in some ways. So that's quite interesting. But as you move further forward into the front half of that front third of your palate, you do have a nice kind of oily, you do have a nice little bit of a kind of oily tangerine sort of thing coming out of this one. You get that big oily orange, which will be both from the Apollo and from the Amarillo. in this one. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really nice. So yeah, really nice kind of oily orangey character. It takes a little bit of time to give you the full zest that you'd expect of the Amarillo, right enough. I've always just, for me, Mosaic is the one that's lighter and zesty. Sabro's got that mandarin and coconut thing, but Amarillo was always the big oily, zesty one, I would say. So yeah, I like the way that this beer goes about its business in that sense. And yeah, the thing is, you do get more of the bread crust and kind of grainy side of this beer coming out the further into the aftertaste you go too. So this one, as I say, I like this beer. It really is quite interesting, and it just goes together in a different way from the other New England hazies that I've had in recent times. So thumbs up to a narrow gauge for giving me something that's a wee bit different. But yeah, let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So mouthfeel wise, for me, this beer, it's kind of mid-bodied, pushing toward the top end of mid-bodied. Carbonation has a little bit of a prickle to it, but like I said, this is quite an oily and slick New England in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, I think this one, the acidulated malt helps give you the impression of a slightly higher bitterness. So I think this could be maybe 30 or 40. I think it's definitely at least 30. I think it could be 40 or maybe just a little bit more than that. I think 40, maybe 50 IBUs is possible with this beer. But always take my IBU counts with a pinch of salt, my weakest point of beer reviewing. And then, yeah, malt base, as we said, is nice and smooth. There is a slight degree of sweetness to it. You get some more graininess and dryness out of it the further into the aftertaste you go. Green component, like we said, has a bit of floral character, good little bit of zesty grassiness, and you've also got some nice juicy and oily fruity notes to this beer as well. So yeah, this beer is this beer really is quite interesting for me, and I've enjoyed it. I really have enjoyed it. So I need to try a few more things from Narrow Gauge. I'd love to see if these guys have an old school West Coast IPA or like a black IPA, or maybe even something, a stout or a barley wine would be interesting to try from them. But yeah, solid New England for me, and quite different to what we've had before. Reminds me of the older Magic Rock beers that we had from England when they were still kind of independent. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So this was the OJ run, 8.6% New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, Imperial Double IPA from Narrow Gauge Brewing in St. Louis in Missouri. Really enjoyed this. So thank you again for watching. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite narrow gauge beers are as well. Let me know some other Missouri breweries that I should check out, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Until the next time, Sludge Skull, cheers. Check out my social media, check out Narrow Gauge's social media, and there'll be more reviews to come. More American stuff as well. Cheers.